I used to think that fear was obvious. I thought fear looked like panic, like shaking hands, racing heart, running away. But the older I get, the more I realize fear is usually much quieter than that. Fear sounds reasonable. Fear sounds responsible. Fear says things like, well, maybe next year, or maybe after the kids are older, or maybe when I have more money, or maybe when I know a little more, or maybe when life finally settles down. And if you notice something, life never really settles down. There's always another bill. There's another responsibility, another reason to wait, another excuse that sounds completely logical. And one day you wake up, not because you made one terrible decision, but because you made 1,000 safe ones. You realize that years have passed, dreams have collected dust, conversations never happened, forgiveness never came, businesses never started, books never got written, podcasts never got recorded. Not because you didn't care, but because fear kept convincing you that waiting was wisdom. And here's the lesson that changed my life. Fear doesn't just keep out danger. Fear often keeps out calling. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Welcome to Pilot Light. I am your host, Josh. You know, most people aren't looking for another self-help podcast. They are looking for a reminder of who they are, a reminder of what matters, a reminder that their story is not over. So wherever you're listening from, whether you're driving to work or you're trying to convince yourself that buying another tool somehow counts as finishing the last project, or you're standing in the grocery store wondering why you walked into aisle 7, or you're sitting in your truck because, hey, it's somehow become the quietest room you own, I am really glad you're here. Let's light the pilot light. Can I tell you something I have been learning? For years, I thought I was being responsible. I really did. I wasn't chasing any crazy ideas. I wasn't taking reckless risks. I was taking care of my family, working hard, paying the bills, doing what needed to be done. And if somebody had asked me if I was afraid, I probably would have said no. But looking back, I think I misunderstood fear. Because fear doesn't always stop you from moving. Sometimes it simply convinces you to postpone. And postponed dreams have a way of becoming permanent. You know, this podcast, Pilot Light, is a perfect example. This idea has lived inside of me for years, not weeks, years. In fact, truth be told, I owned the microphones and everything that I needed to do this podcast over a year ago. I had the ideas, I had the notebooks, I had the stories, I had the desire. What I didn't have was permission, or at least I didn't think I did. I kept telling myself, I'm not ready. I need more time. I need a better plan. I need to learn more. And looking back, those weren't preparation statements. Those were fear statements. Fear had simply learned to speak in my own voice. I remember having the battle in my head. My last birthday, so over a year ago, my wife, she bought some of the podcast equipment. I used some of my birthday money to buy more podcast equipment. And I remember feeling guilty. I thought, you know what? Maybe this could have been spent for better things. Maybe I could have used this for another tool or something around the house. Or maybe this could have gone to some other bill or something else with there. And I remember having that battle internally, feeling guilt because it felt irresponsible. Yet I had this desire in me. I had this, what felt like I was being called to do, this need to be able to express some of the things that I had been through in life and some of the things I was learning and going through this entire process. And I remember getting to that point where I finally hit record. And it was this last birthday. I remember this was my goal. I was like, you know what? I'm going to hit record no matter what on this last birthday, and I'm going to get this thing published. So I remember hitting record. I remember editing, and I remember finally hitting publish. And I felt like in that moment, all of a sudden, fear just was able to disappear because I had done the thing. I had conquered that thing that I was postponing because I didn't think I was ready. And I'm probably still not ready. In fact, I'm going to make a ton of mistakes. In this podcast, I've already made a bunch of mistakes. But the thing is, I'm moving forward. I'm trusting God in faith that what he's called me to do will come about in the way he wants it to be done. So it's about giving permission to become. You know, one day I realized something, that fear had been asking me one question over and over again. And it was just sitting in my head. And this is where that irresponsibility felt like it came in. It's like, what if this doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? Did I waste the money? Did I waste the time? Did I waste the effort? What if it doesn't work? But there was another question that I had never asked. And it was, but what if it does? What if it does? What if somebody needs this conversation? Or what if obedience matters more than the outcome? What if success isn't measured by numbers, but by faithfulness? And suddenly I wasn't asking, what if I fail? I was asking, what if I never try? And honestly, that question scared me even more. So here's the big idea behind this. Here's what I've learned. Fear rarely tells you to quit. It tells you to wait just a little longer until you're ready, until you're confident, until you're certain, until the timing is perfect. But here's the problem. Calling almost never arrives wrapped in certainty. It arrives wrapped in opportunity, and opportunity almost always requires faith. The greatest danger isn't that fear makes bad decisions. The greatest danger is that fear keeps us from making the right ones. Here's my first point in this. Fear promises safety. Fear makes a compelling argument. It promises protection. It says, hey, stay where it's familiar. Like just this cozy blanket. Stay where it's familiar. Stay where it's comfortable. Stay where you're qualified. Stay where people expect you to be. And sometimes, yes, that is wise. But sometimes, and I want you to hear me on this, comfort becomes a cage. Because the safest place isn't always the healthiest place. Growth rarely happens inside complete certainty. Here's my second point to this today. Calling usually feels uncomfortable. I want you to think about every meaningful decision that you have ever made. Marriage, parenthood, maybe changing careers, starting something new. None of them came with guarantees. Only invitations. And calling usually arrives before confidence. That's why courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something else matters more. Sometimes what matters more is becoming the person that you were created to be. And here's my third point. Faith isn't certainty. One of the things that I love about Scripture is that faith is almost always connected to movement. Here's some examples. Abraham leaves. Moses returns to Egypt. Peter steps out of the boat. The disciples leave their nets. You notice something? None of them knew the whole plan. God rarely hands people the blueprint. He usually gives them just the next step. Maybe because trust grows while we're walking, not while we're waiting. So can I ask you something today? Where has fear been disguising itself as wisdom? Where or what have you been postponing? What conversation keeps getting delayed? What dream keeps getting pushed into someday? What decision have you almost made 100 different times? Now ask yourself one more question. If fear wasn't making this decision, what would I do? Sit with that. Let me ask one more time. If fear wasn't making this decision, what would I do? Because your answer may reveal where your calling has been waiting. You know what's crazy to me about this podcast as I started, and honestly, I didn't know if anybody was going to listen. And sometimes it's almost the weirdest feeling knowing that people are listening to your voice. And even as you're listening to my voice right now, it's like, for whatever reason, I just feel called to do this. But one of the coolest things is hearing people talk about it and mentioning to me how much each individual episode has meant to them. And even if that's all that this ends up being is just those moments, it's worth it. If that's what God called me to do, just to have an influence on one person, it becomes worth it in that moment. And I think that's where we have to put aside maybe some of our own fears and the things that we need to postpone, because maybe the one thing that you're being called to do is important for that next person. And I want to challenge you with that. Don't let things be delayed because of fear. So this week, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to conquer your biggest fear. We're not jumping down that road quite yet. Don't conquer your biggest fear. Just confront one small one. Maybe it's making a phone call. Maybe it's sending an application. Maybe you need to record the first video, or maybe you need to apologize or forgive, or you need to sign up for something, or just start. One small act of courage. Because courage isn't built in giant moments. It's built one decision at a time. Here's the thing, years from now, I don't think we're going to regret every mistake we made. We'll regret the moments that we let fear make our decisions, the opportunities we ignored, the conversations we avoided, the gifts that we buried. There's a responsibility behind it. The gifts, the things that you were gifted in, the things that we bury. What have you buried? The dreams that we quietly abandoned. Maybe today isn't about becoming fearless. Maybe it's becoming faithful. Maybe it's faithful enough to take the next step, faithful enough to trust God with the outcome, faithful enough to believe that your calling is bigger than your comfort, because fear doesn't get the final word. It only gets a suggestion, and you get to decide whether you'll listen. Hey, thanks for spending a few moments with me today. I do not take that for granted. And if this conversation encouraged you, please pass the flame. Someone you know may be standing on the edge of a decision that they've been afraid to make. And remember, see farther, live deeper, become who you were created to be, because you were created to be a fire, not just a flicker. Hey, before we go, I want to ask you for two quick things. First of all, if Pilot Light has encouraged you, would you just take a moment to follow the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? It may seem like a really small thing, but honestly, it helps this message reach more people who might need a little light in their life. And secondly, I want to hear from you, because Pilot Light was never meant to be just a podcast, and you'll hear this in future episodes. It is meant to be a conversation. So could you go visit my website? It's www.mypilotlight.com, and just go over to fan mail, and I want you to send me a message. It'll text me a message, or you can even leave me a voicemail, and I want you to tell me your story. What challenged you? What encouraged you? What did you do differently? Or maybe most importantly, who did you pass the flame to? Maybe you shared an episode with a friend. Maybe you encouraged someone who needed it. Maybe you had a conversation you've been putting off, or maybe you chose to show up differently. I want to hear those stories. Some of them I might even share on the website or include in future episodes, because you never know how your story might light the way for somebody else. So remember again, a flame was never meant to be kept silent. It was meant to be passed. So keep passing the flame. And as always, see farther, live deeper, become who you were created to be, because you were created to be a fire, not just a flicker. So let's keep the pilot light on, and I will see you next time.